Joining me live is Simon Jackman, CEO of the US Studies Centre. Thanks very much for your time. Look, it's interesting to look at this approval rating. So on the one hand, better than Trump. I mean, that was a pretty low point for much of his presidency. But in terms of cleaving off any support from Republicans, he appears to be failing, at least so far.
Yeah, it's a feature of recent American presidencies, Tom. Successively over time, what we've seen is more and more polarisation in American politics. But one incredible indicator of it is the way that people from the president's the party opposing the president, the low level of support for the president among that group. And Joe Biden has just 11% of Republicans approving of his role as president. Barack Obama, at the same time of his presidency, 14. But that number, where you begin with the partisans of the other party, that number has been going down over time. And it's as much to do with, I think, a longer-term trend in American politics as anything, but it sure does underscore, Tom, the big challenge Biden faces and the enormity of the task he put before the country of unifying the nation.
Perhaps, I mean, it can go north. It's very early on. I'm not trying to say it's, cooked for him, and the Republicans sort of blow up, that will only help him. So we'll see on that front. Look, interesting as well, I know you were looking at this town hall meeting Joe Biden held. Quite interesting that on the Uyghurs, there were two different takes out of this. One, that he'd said there will be consequences for the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping, but also, and this particular comment that he made, to do with, well, there are different cultural norms, which sort of led some people to say, well, is that excusing what's happening?
Yeah, indeed, Tom. A lot of parsing of that statement, and indeed parsing of any statement to do with China at the moment. It is perhaps the most watched foreign policy issue for Australia coming out of this new administration. So, what's interesting about that, Tom, the issue of human rights in China has long been thought to be the part of the ensemble of issues that unites, frankly, the entire American spectrum from left to right around needing to take a tougher line and needing to be more competitive with China in particular. That's why this statement about sort of putting, if you will, almost a Chinese frame or a Chinese parsing of what's going on there in Xinjiang province, that was curious, to say the least. And I'll be interested to see where congressional Republicans go with that. Do they jump on that as a possible fault line and a reason to go after Biden? I would point out, Tom, Biden's nomination for Commerce Secretary ran into a please explain herself over, she was a little middle of the road even on the Huawei ban in the United States, and that sort of not being full-throated on Huawei and 5G, that slowed down her nomination. And so it's something that I think China hawks, and indeed big part of the foreign policy establishment, certainly up on Capitol Hill, carefully paying attention to anything coming out of this new administration with respect to China, as are we here in Australia, by the way.
Yeah, well, that is an interesting one to watch. On the one hand, wants to have better ties with China, but not to be seen as in any way, giving Xi an out, if you like. Hey, let's talk about Texas, this incredible cold snap in what's usually quite a warm state. We're hearing, well, it's a bit of deja vu for Australians because on the one hand, some of the wind power, for example, has failed, pictures of frozen wind towers. But on the other hand, a big failure in other coal, fired power or normal resources sort of fired power. But what's been really interesting since is Ted Cruz, of course, the governor, going off on a bit of a frolic. Here was his response today on this holiday to Mexico in the midst of this crisis in the state.
Whether the decision to go was tone deaf, look, it was obviously a mistake, and in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it. I was trying to be a dad, and all of us have made decisions. When you've got two girls who've been cold for two days and haven't had heater power, and they're saying, hey, look, we don't have school, why don't we go, let's get out of here. I think there are a lot of parents that'd be like, all right, if I can do this, great.
So that was the Texas senator. It hasn't played well.
No.
What have you made of all of this?
Well, two things to note, Tom. First of all, is a substantive matter. Why has Texas had this issue. And there are many similarities with elements of power here in this country as well. The nature of the grid in Texas, sort of various parts of regulation and market failure that hasn't brought as much natural gas to market to replace the wind turbine power that's been offline. And then you've got this spectacle of Ted Cruz. That is some furious backpedaling on this issue. And indeed, that's the most full-throated sort of most apologetic he's been on this issue. It seems every hour he sort of has to be a little more contrite on this one. But that was quite fulsome of the senator, who is a presidential hopeful, right? And so this is the sort of thing that will kill him in a presidential primary, or even, frankly, Tom, remember how close Beto O'Rourke took him at his midterm re-election bid back in 2018. He has not got a lot of room to play with, either for his own ambition to be a candidate for the presidency and even retaining the seat. So not a good look. I don't know how many other Texas families thought flying to Cancun was actually on the table as a live option. That's going to, you can see the ads. They almost cut themselves out of those grabs he gave there.
Almost a perp walk it turned into in the airport there. Just finally and briefly, Rush Limbaugh has died, of course, a conservative commentator. What did you make of his legacy, if you like?
Well, look, I think the thing to note is that he took the shock jock genre to the next level in the United States, and I think was the first one, sort of media entrepreneur superstar, if you will, to sort of show that there was great commercial value in running a particular line. And then also found a syndication model as well to really build a massive, influential to national audience, and was the first of many that followed behind him. He really was, for better or for worse, whatever you think of his politics, a pioneer in changing the media and, in turn, I believe, the ideological landscape of the United States and of the Republican Party in particular. And I think I'd put his passing right up there with the passing of Roger Ailes, the guy that transformed Fox News in America to make it the force in American politics that it is. We are seeing at the end of an era, I think, and the real interesting question in these opening months of a Biden presidency, and indeed all the moves that we're hearing about with respect to social media as well, where we land on that, other countries perhaps following suit with Australia. Who knows where that will land in the United States? But there is a transformation underway as we see those giants that sort of created the media political landscape as we understand the United States today, two of them in recent years passing. What comes next, I think, is, and where do we go from here? No matter what your view of the politics are, it's a noteworthy development to note his passing.
Yeah, and not without controversy, the last two men you've mentioned, of course, to say the least. Simon Jackman, always great to chat. Talk next week.
Good on you, Tom. Thank you.